Ryan Bomberger joins us on the show today. He is an amazing man with an amazing story. Ryan was conceived in rape. His mother chose life, and he was adopted into a family of 15. Now he has a beautiful family of his own. He and his wife have started the Radiance Foundation, and he now speaks for the most vulnerable in and outside of the womb. You're really going to enjoy this inspiring episode. So before we get into it, Ryan, I have a lot of questions I want to ask you.
Awesome.
We haven't seen each other in a while. I want you to share with everybody who's watching who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to be here with you, Kristan. And I love being in this fight. It's thoroughly exhausting every single day, but I can't imagine doing anything else. My wife, Bethany, and I run the Radiance Foundation, but part of our organization's story is wrapped up in my own adoption story. I came from a small family of 15, where I have 6 brothers, 6 sisters. 10 of us were adopted. I was the first one of the 10 adopted, and I'm brown. I don't know if you noticed that, but our family is like every color. We're white and black, mixed, Native American, Vietnamese, able, disabled. All of us love like crazy by the people who supposedly don't care about children after they're born. The whole pro-lifer mantra that the pro-abortion side loves to put out there. My parents loved all of us. So that was my start. I had a courageous birth mom who not only gave me the gift of life, but gave me that gift of adoption. And so now I'm married to my best friend, the love of my life, Bethany. We have 4 kiddos, 2 of whom were also adopted. So that's why I'm particularly passionate, because when people say, well, what about rape? I'm like, that's me. I mean, you talk about the most marginalized among the marginalized, that's me. How could I not fight for others like me?
Why, when you're talking to a politician or a political leader, and they say, well, we just need to add this exception into our pro-life law, are you down with allowing exceptions into pro-life laws for children who are conceived in rape, or are you against it?
I'm against killing any innocent human life in utero, so we could start there. The problem is these exceptions are always exploited. Like those with stories like mine are always exploited in order to justify all abortions. And so what we have to realize is the pro-abortion side doesn't care what the exceptions are. I mean, even if there were the exception for rape and incest, they're going to fight the bill because it's a pro-life bill, because it actually protects human life. So for people to be duped into this mindset that somehow, oh, wait, if we just add just this little caveat, no, it never works. It never appeases the pro-abortion side. And so, and I experienced this too recently in Texas, where, the Democrats wanted to add all of these exceptions, including, those who are disabled in utero, and having disabled brothers and sisters. I'm also passionate against that, but they wanted to add all of these things because they want to whittle away at the essence of the bill, and that is to protect human life and to protect mothers from the violence of abortion. So my thing to those who want to add these exceptions, I'm like, don't be fooled. Don't be a fool, because it's never going to appease the pro-abortion side.
So Ryan, what would be the first thing you would say if a woman came up to you and said, I've been raped and I'm pregnant, and I think I should abort this baby?
I would say, well, I'm glad you're sharing that with me. I'm so sorry you went through something so horrific. I know a little bit about this. My birth mom went through that same exact experience. And I'm telling you that there is help and hope for those who've experienced what you've gone through. And I would say to them, like my birth mom, when people stand by you, they speak hope and life into you. There are resources. Thank God for the 3,000 plus pregnancy centers that can actually, walk her through this journey. There are Christian resources for her to go. And if she's not a Christian, there are also other resources where she can get the kind of support she needs. That's important, because we can't forget about that there are 2 victims. There is the woman who has been violated, and there is potentially the child who will be violated with the violence of abortion. So we have to understand that in the natural, people think, oh, well, abortion is the follow-up. Of course, you would abort something that was the result of something so horrific. But, standing before that person, like, I am evidence that triumph can rise from tragedy. And I'm not the only one. There are many others like me who actually show the resilience of our birth mothers. or the resilience of our moms. Not every woman who chooses to keep a child as a result of rape chooses to place a child for adoption. Some raise that child, like Nancy Kelly, who had twins as a result. I remember crying on the steps of the Capitol there in Alabama. And when she said, my twins changed my life, I'm like weeping and thinking how incredible, because people don't see it that way. They only see this singular narrative that there is pain and there is misery.
That's right.
And when there's love and support, there is a very different outcome.
That's right.
And so I would tell that young lady, would say, you know what, you could be loved through this. And you can also be able to love that child, whether you parent that child or choose adoption, but you can love that child too by being strong enough for both of you.
Have you ever been able to have a conversation like that?
I have, actually, a number of times. It's amazing. I get these DMs, or I'll get something, through Facebook or a text. We have a family, we have a young woman who's facing this situation. Would you be able to spare a few minutes? And I'm always, yes. Even if I'm completely wiped out, tired, or I'm traveling, which I'm do a lot of traveling. But I figure, oh my gosh, I could have a few minutes with this person who could and help change their mindset, help them understand that, no, this is not going to be easy. And life is not easy for a lot of different reasons, but you can make it. And here's what the other side can look like. So yeah, I've had opportunities to be able to speak that.
What are the outcomes?
I don't always know the outcome.
Yeah.
I can tell you there are 4 instances out of the, I think there have been 12 specific instances, if I keeping track. But there were 4 instances where I know specifically what the outcome was, and that was they changed their minds. In fact, recently, because of our Adopted and Loved initiative, where we featured our first family, and in that story, the mother, Angela Cross, shares her post-abortive story and how for 10 years she suffered from all the shame and the guilt from that. And as a result of our Adopted and Love Fund, she and her husband, Tanner Cross, were able to adopt. But they just texted me, I guess I can reveal this as personal, but they just texted me that someone watched that video who had gone through that circumstance of having experienced rape. And that video changed their minds. No, I may not have spoken to her directly, but it was something that we created. And I just love how we sometimes don't realize just taking the time, just investing, just speaking seemingly ordinary words change things extraordinarily.
No. I mean, thank you for doing that. I know I've seen that personally in my own life of, now filming my speeches on campuses, and then, the videos go viral, and I've never considered myself a social media influencer.
Oh, you are
type. And and to do that, you open yourself up to a lot of criticism from friends, which is what hurts usually the most. Right. Criticism about your appearance. God forbid that you be an overweight white woman in America, and death threats and other threats, right?
It's terrible.
And so, I can take that stuff on my chin, but it's just funny to think that I never really thought of that vision for my life or a path in my life where I would be this like viral person where people recognize me out in normal world, not just in camera world. And it's kind of unnerving a little bit because I'm sort of an introvert in my personal life, but extrovert in my advocacy life. But it's amazing because the stories that come in of someone, like meeting, I met this little boy a couple months ago at this pregnancy center banquet. I was kicking myself for going, and I was like, why did I say yes? My husband's mad. I'm gone away another night. And I met this beautiful young mother who saw our video, binge watched me. God love her. I felt so bad. But then I got to meet, she brought her little boy who was cute, but instantly became like the 5th cutest baby I've ever seen outside of my 4 children. When she told me, oh, here's baby Hudson, who I was going to have an abortion with. I mean, it just mind-blowing that, me responding to some snarky blue-haired college kid resulted in a mom who was in crisis choosing life. I don't know if you've had that same feeling, but
exactly. And it's humbling though too.
It is,
because there are many times we go into things, we have certain expectations, usually low expectations, especially how God can use us. But my gosh, when you see that played out in real life, it's so powerful. And that's why this side of heaven, we will only we'll get glimpses of
Yeah.
it. I think it's to help us not get a big head. Not
Yes.
that you or I. I'm just saying.
Oh
Just
no,
in
the
general,
pro-life movement does a really good job making sure I don't get a big head.
My
Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? People always want you to stay in your lane. Like, do you know what my lane is? I
Yeah.
hate when people tell you what you should be. I'm like, I know what I'm called to do. You know what you're called to do. Just do it.
Just do it.
I mean, your vulnerability, and it is a vulnerable thing to be in those classrooms and the hate that you get.
Yeah.
But that vulnerability enables breakthrough to happen
does.
over and over and over again.
You just have to be willing to be criticized a little bit. And,
Right.
I have nights that aren't my best nights, and everyone likes to remind me of, and they'll like compare stuff. Like, well, Kristan was slacking on that one. And I'm like, okay, well, you do it. Then.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to put yourself out there and allow those bad nights to happen, because when the good nights happen, babies are saved.
Yeah. And even during the bad nights.
Even bad nights. Yeah.
Even those times when I'm like, oh, I wish I would have said it this way. I wish I would have said that. And in media
keeps me up
interviews
at
and things
night.
like that. But in the end, oh my gosh, you're still saying something inevitably that's going to resonate with somebody's heart.
That's absolutely true. I know one time I did a media interview and I said the truth, but I think the rest of the movement would have preferred me to just be a little bit, just hide that a little bit.
Right.
And I remember I got some interesting text messages, but I got some beautiful comments after that though too. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for saying that. I do want to talk to you about the exception more about those who are conceived and raped, because as we saw with Ohio, then we saw with Kentucky this fall, and the ballot referendums, and the governor's fight in Kentucky, and they used a video, a commercial of this beautiful young girl who had been raped. And after Governor Bashir's wife, she was the next person he thanked for winning re-election, right? Andy Bashir, the pro-abortion governor of Kentucky. Obviously, we know that this young girl's testimony, he believes, was the reason he won over pro-life Daniel Cameron. But it's been interesting here in Washington, the comments that I've been hearing from like the Inside the Beltway consultants and pollsters has been, well, we just can't win on exceptions. And we've polled it. Our Dimitri Institute for Pro-Life Advancement, our youth and abortion poll this January, we do it every year. I actually asked this year, I took rape off the table. I said, assuming your state has a law allowing abortions in cases of rape, incest, or life of your mother, how likely would you be to vote for a constitutional amendment to allow abortion up until the moment of birth? And 63% said they still were going to be likely to vote. Right. And you and I see that on campus all the time, where I talk to a student and they'll say, well, about rape? And I'll say, okay, let's take it off the table. Let's theoretically assume I introduce a law that prevents all abortions except in cases of rape, incest, or life of the mother. Would you join me in advocating for that law's passage?
Right.
I've never had one student say, oh, yeah, of course. Because it immediately goes, well, what about... And then I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're trotting out the horror of a sexual assault survivor to justify your abortion beliefs that are far beyond just rape and abortion.
Right.
So I don't know. It's been frustrating because I've been hearing this kind of like dialogue of like the pro-life movement should just accept rape exceptions. Right. We should put them in our pro-life laws. That way, when the ballot referendums come, we'll win. And I'm like, first of all, that's... what you said earlier in the first segment, that's not true, but I don't know, maybe there's another solution that no one's thinking about. What do you think another option could be here, Ryan?
I don't know. Maybe actually stop fearing what they're cheering. This is what drives me crazy when it comes to messaging. They say, oh, well, see, we were defeated. And I watched that video you're talking about, the young lady. I mean, my heart goes out to her, especially because she's being exploited in order to justify further violence against others.
In her name.
Right. And so here, instead of actually the conservative side, the pro-life side, actually messaging on this and being fearless about it, we're not going to say a word about it. Well, of course, in the absence of any messaging to the contrary, and then you have that very powerfully and very well done video, well, of course, it's going to seem like it's more convincing. But if you're afraid to talk about the actual issue, like in the state of Virginia, I mean, they decided that they were going to, we're pro-life and we're going to do the 15-week thing. That's a common ground issue. First of all, common ground typically means that you're the one in sinking sand if you're the pro-life one. they never cede ground.
No,
but we're the ones who are always supposed to, okay, give it another inch. Oh, give another 5 feet. Oh, wait, just give up pretty much everything except for. So the exceptions are always going to be exploited. When I speak at college, on college campuses, the same thing. When I say, okay, well, let's leave aside rape and incest, and will you then give me all the rest of abortions, which obviously aren't due to any kind of physical impairment or physical endangerment of the woman's life or the violence of rape or incest. And it's just the go-to.
Yep.
It is always the go-to. And I'm tired of being that example every time that's used. Well, that particular human being doesn't deserve to live. And again, I want to bring back the focus to what brings healing and wholeness to the woman who experiences that violence. It's not abortion. Abortion, actually, the act of abortion doesn't care the reasons why you have the abortion. There's still the emotional, physiological, psychological effects on the woman, regardless of the reason. Yeah. And I will tell you, I've had many rape survivors over the years come up to me, and I'll tell you, I was surprised myself. Those who were post-abortive, those who chose to parent, those who chose adoption. And the common thread that I hear from them over and over again is that the child is the only redemptive part of such a horrific act. And so that's why we're not getting it right. And when we fear messaging it, we lose out and we lose elections.
Yeah, no, literally that was the argument I got in response. I sent the poll saying, see, look, like they say rape because I think in their minds, this pro-choice youth mind, they feel like they can get a moral high ground when they argue for rape in cases, abortion cases of rape. But they know they don't really have the moral high ground for every other, all 97% of reasons. Right. And so they're using it, but it's not really what they mean, because we all know people lie to pollsters. So even if people say like, oh, this law only had a rape exception, I would have voted for it. Really? Would you have? Because our research found that most women have a parachute. One parachute in the back of their mind, they keep that even if they don't like abortion, even if they call themselves pro-life, they know that if something happened, they could always have one abortion. Right. And we got to get rid of that back the mind option before we, No, it's been very frustrating because my thought is, well, maybe the solution is get women who've survived rape and are thriving now, who conceived, get their voices and their stories out, as opposed to in Kentucky right now, pro-life legislators are trying to add a rape exception into their law. Right. They're trying to add it in. I've never heard of pro-lifers trying to add in new laws to kill more babies. Right.
Well, we have to remember this is how it all began. I mean, with the Therapeutic Abortion Act in California in 1967, it started off with rape and incest and the physical life of the mother, or maybe it didn't say physical, maybe it said life of the mother. And that's how it began. Of course, now California kills, well, we don't even know because they don't keep accurate stats, but it's probably around 100,000 or more. And it started off as something seemingly, to some, innocuous. Of course, killing any human being is never innocuous, but it started off seemingly harmless. Yep. To some, and then it grew into this massive number. And my question, too, for all these pro-abortion advocates who constantly want to throw these exceptions in, why aren't you ever talking about punishing the rapist? Why does that never come up? Every college I've ever spoken to, all kinds of different events, they never want to talk about punishing the rapist. But instead, what they're actually advocating is punishing the woman with a lifetime of regret and what ifs, and leaving her to an abortionist who doesn't care at all about her. Like the weekend abortionist who flies into the state, does, how many 150 abortions or more.
I'm pretty sure they still charge for her abortion, just like they charge for everyone else's abortion.
They're not some sort of altruistic charity sort of case or individuals. No, they're just predators who offer violence as some sort of solution, and they're out.
How'd you feel about that? So this situation happened, was it 2 summers ago, where the 10-year-old girl was raped by what we found out to be the mother's boyfriend in Ohio. Right. Her mother drove her to Indiana to have an abortion. This celebrity abortionist who tries to get like national TV credit and actually got in big trouble because she violated HIPAA and going public with the story, made it a big deal that she aborted a child of a 10-year-old who was raped and she had to come to Indiana because Ohio is so draconian. And then President Biden. I do remember that.
Oh, yeah.
It was I remember the minute. It was 17-minute long national address condemning the pro-life movement.
Right.
He never once in that whole thing talked about the predator or what happened to the rapist. What did you think about that?
Oh, of course not. Well, of course, the Biden administration is the most grotesquely pro-abortion administration we have ever seen, right? So they will exploit anything. And this is what they do. Again, they go to these extreme cases where, in that case, apparently, according to, I think, the Ohio AG, that 10-year-old child, it qualified under an emergency abortion, regardless of whether. So that kind of takes away some of that argument. Of course, my hope is that a 10-year-old never gets in that situation in the first place. So why don't we talk about the person who's here illegally? Did Biden address the open border that he's allowed, the illegal immigration, and all the harm that's come across, not just from deaths from fentanyl, but the sex trafficking and the rape of children? In fact, we have the similar case here in the state of Virginia, several in Loudoun County, where you have people here illegally who have raped young girls. But again, Biden administration would never talk about the people who are actually committing the crime. My heart goes out. I don't want any child to ever experience that kind of violence, and I don't want any child to experience violence in the womb either. But this administration is so absolutely disconnected because they are enabling and empowering predators over and again. Planned Parenthood, when's the last time we ever heard about them busting some prostitution sting? Never. Because they're actually for the legalization of prostitution.
Right. Third wave feminism right there.
I mean, we want to talk about who's actually wanting to protect girls and women. It is the pro-life movement. It is protecting young girls and women from the violence of abortion and from those who actually create the situation where they're faced with even that decision. But that to me was just, it was the typical strategy of pro-abortion politicians who go to that less than 1%, and then we have to justify the 100% of abortions. It's all a fraud. Pro-choice is a fraud. They know it, but unfortunately they have the biggest megaphone, not just the bully pulpit, but they have mainstream media to keep repeating the lies and the distortions and ignore, the source of that violence, where it even begins, like the predator in that case. And we still don't even know. Do we even know what happened to him?
I'm not real sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he was deported.
It was after the pro-life movement in Ohio got involved, then they finally went and arrested him. Like this was months after he had raped this child and she became pregnant. She had the abortion, but it was only after it went in the media and the pro-lifers were like, "Where's the rapist? Like, is she safe from the rapist?" And then the story started to unravel. I believe about the mother's boyfriend, blah blah blah. But I just remember that story. It's a quintessential story about how the abortion left uses rape survivors to justify 100% of abortions, and they do it so grotesquely. I mean, it's unbelievable the way they do it. So before we move into the next segment, I want to talk to you a little bit about adoption. You are a marketer, and you're one of the best marketers I know in the pro-life movement. And we're not really known for that in the pro-life movement, of being really great marketers.
Not exactly.
Yeah. Okay. You and I have had lots of conversations about that over the years. If you were in charge of Pro-Life Inc.,
oh my gosh,
what messaging campaign should we launch? I'm asking for my own personal self right now, more than listeners. What campaign should we launch to turn the tide on this what about rape argument?
Well, I think, first of all, my shirt does say adopted and loved, because that's what I am. Having been adopted and being an adoptive father, I'm really passionate about that. Adoption is under attack right now from the pro-abortion side. But when we talk about the issue of rape, when it comes to messaging, people are moved by stories of transformation. I mean, I'm the kind of guy who'll watch a movie when you see the underdog triumphing. I mean, I cry. I'm ridiculous. My kids are embarrassed sometimes. But what we don't do enough of we don't do enough of showing these transformative stories. Where the other side, they're out there, shout your abortion. I mean, I don't know why we're not able to shout my triumph. I mean, where we show these stories of overcoming. Sometimes people just need to see someone else who's been where they are to know that they can get over this. They can get through this. That's why I love, the work of pregnancy centers and so many of the directors I've worked with for years and years. And I hear these stories. I'm like, I wish there was some way that there were like an ad council for the pro-life movement, something that I called years ago, I called it the creative response unit, where we could immediately respond to things going on in the culture, to, the question, what about rape? We could create the graphics, we create the videos and put them out there immediately with nobody's branding. That anybody, if they want to put their own branding on, that's fine, but it actually it's brandless. Please use this so that there is cohesive, coherent messaging. Because the important thing is that we're getting it out there. We're able to get these stories of, that will make grown men cry and able to get that out there in the public sphere. Now, granted, we have to overcome all kinds of hurdles, increasingly so. Yeah. But obviously, you're able to do that through YouTube and through other media platforms like TikTok. But there's such a desperate need for people to actually hear the story that they can connect to. But our problem is there isn't enough. That's right. There isn't enough out there, especially when it comes to issues of rape, because it's like the immediate shutdown. You say the word rape, it's like, okay, doors are down. There's no further discussion. But there is further discussion when you talk to women who became mothers through rape and what their journey was. I mentioned Nancy Kelly. She's just one. Rebecca Berg is another. There are a number of them out there, and others conceived in rape like I am, who were either adopted or were raised by the biological mother. There are stories that can radically transform, but if we're afraid to talk about it, my phrase is, I'm the 1% used 100% of the time to justify abortion. And my kids often echo my quotes. They try to mock me sometimes, but they have them all down. But that sticks with them. Yep. And it's amazing. Not just the phrase will stick with people, but the transformation that happens sticks with people. I wish we had the kind of funding that the left does, but you know what? We can't wish. Right. Abolitionists probably wished a whole lot of things. Slavery abolitionists, and they were scrappers. And a lot of times that's one
of our core values of Students' Life, gritty.
We are, yeah.
Well, I need to connect you with a friend of mine because we're working on something just like that right now.
That's awesome.
We're unbranded pro-life messaging for the whole pro-life movement.
Okay.
And everyone can take credit for it. I don't care. So, but I tried to do it once myself and it didn't work because I was associated with the organization. So I got somebody else who was not associated with the organization to do it. So pretty excited. I got a hook up. Maybe I can help this person.
We need more of that. I just hate how the left has all the Sonic candy. They have all the ear candy. And we have the most pressing issue in the world. Yep. Why don't we have a better mechanism to be able to get the messaging out?
All right, so let's get into adoption.
All right.
Share with us your passion. How did you and Bethany, your wife, decide you wanted to adopt 2 children?
Well, when my wife and I were engaged, my wife was already a single mom. So she had a little girl. And her story, which is really important to understand why we wanted to continue working as advocates for adoption, is that she was a single teacher, her late 20s in Philly, walked away from a toxic relationship, only to find out 2 weeks later that she was pregnant. And so thinking that, she's teaching in inner city Philly, she is trying as a teacher to not have her kids repeat some of these behaviors so that they don't get caught in these generational traps. Yep. And she's like, okay, I'm a hypocrite because I'm now living that. So she felt shame. First of all, shame is a terrible motivator. But she realized that, one, she could never abort, but the biological father wanted the baby aborted. Kept pressuring her like crazy. Her fellow teachers said, just abort it. Some even offered to pay for the abortion. Never considered it, but the pressure on her, how are you going to continue your career? Yeah. So that baby girl's name is Radiance. She was not aborted. She is 19 years old, and she is a student at Liberty University. The love of our lives. I was able to adopt her. Mm-hmm. So when we're engaged, before all that happened, we're engaged, Bethany said, well, I don't know. Are you going to be able to love her the same way you will love any biological children we might have? I'm like, have you met me? I'm the favorite in my family. I was the first one adopted. Of course I could love her just like she is my own. She is my very own. And so that was Bethany's question back then. Here we have 4 children now. 2 were adopted. My youngest son, Justice, we both adopted. In fact, the adoptions happened on the same day in Atlanta courthouse. It was crazy. There was some ugly crying all day, just miracle after miracle. But we love the beauty of adoption. We love supporting birth moms as much as we can. And we really are trying to dispel so many myths that still have a stranglehold on not just, culture at large, but too many Christians have misperceptions. Yeah. Too many in the church have misperceptions about adoption. So
have you been on TikTok lately?
Oh my gosh.
On TikTok and Instagram, there's so many people are saying adoption is trauma. So therefore it's better that the child be aborted than adopted. What would you say to that? I mean, I know what I would say too, but
I know what I would say, but I would probably clean up the language here a little bit.
Like, you can do it nicer.
That whole thing about trauma. I mean, we live in a culture that is fixated with our present feelings and holding on to past hurt. Trauma, as I've said in several settings, especially when we do our adopted and loved presentations. I mean, trauma exists, yes, but trauma should be a reference point, not a resting place. And so when people want to define everything by that traumatic experience and this traumatic experience, I mean, there's triumph in this. And so oftentimes when I hear trauma and those who constantly want to fixate on trauma, they don't really talk about the triumph part of it. And for someone to say you're better off dead, I mean, with 9 other siblings who are adopted, so we would have been better off dead. No, nobody's better off dead. We're all better off loved. My children, my youngest son, he's in the other room here. My other son was not better off dead. No. I can't imagine life without him. So for people to say that, it is one, the most callous thing. I just imagine, what other group of people do you say, well, they should just be dead? Well, of course, in our culture right now, with the anti-Semitic sort of insanity, there are people who just brazenly say that. But it's insane to say that another human being should be dead because you don't understand their circumstances. You don't understand what their journey can be. Even Simone Biles, the world's most decorated gymnast, when 2 summers ago, she came out as pro-choice, pro-abortion, and she said the same thing. These children shouldn't experience the trauma of having to be in foster care, which she was in foster care for a bit of time because her mother had an addiction to drugs. Her grandparents rescued her. They adopted and loved her. She is, to me, just the epitome of what we call the Radiance Foundation, the beauty of possibility. So yet she's saying, no, these kids shouldn't experience the trauma. They're better off. She didn't say better off dead, but she supports abortion. So she's saying, well, they shouldn't experience that kind of emotional hardship. They would be better off not being here. That to me is insane because she is actually living out what we're saying. Is that when people step in with love, they change the whole trajectory of somebody's life. So no, I'm definitely not better off dead. And I'm pretty sure my wife and my kiddos are really glad that I'm alive. Obviously, some of them wouldn't be here without me being alive. That to me is such a cop-out. And it's such an anti-human approach to very solvable issues. Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. I hear the comment then on campuses, well, you wouldn't know if you were dead anyway if you were aborted, so it doesn't harm anything. But it's almost like this, like they think that there's like a no harm no foul, because especially if the baby's aborted before consciousness evolves, right? Their thought is, well, you wouldn't know, you didn't have any feelings back then anyway as a fetus, so it doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, it still matters whether or not you're advocating for killing defenseless humans.
Well, what if there was a mandate, some crazy mandate, where all unborn children in the state of Virginia were mandated to be killed by abortion? Would it be terrible? Why would it be terrible? Would it be terrible because the woman didn't have a choice, or is it terrible because killing innocent human life is a terrible thing? It's a horrible thing. It's not because they didn't have consciousness. Of course, I question whether a lot of college students have consciousness when you hear some of their responses. But the insanity is, I mean, there are situations, people in coma and whatnot, they don't, just because someone doesn't feel something or they may not be aware that it's going on, doesn't mean that the evil act perpetrated against them isn't wrong. That whole nonsense, any woman who's ever been attacked and whose child has been killed, fetal homicide in that sense, she will tell you about a grave loss. Women who have miscarriages through no fault of their own, of course, but they feel grave loss. Right. We just, as a society, I'm kind of it's kind of scary where people are going. I mean, some of the inside thoughts are so outside, but if these things were carried out in social policy, where would we be? I mean, recently in the state of Texas, the young girl who murdered her child because she said that the state wouldn't allow her to abort a child. So I am sure the pro-abortion side is going to just sweep to her defense. Well, of course, this is justifiable. No, killing innocent human life in and out of the womb isn't justifiable at all. But that side will continue to expand their infanticide and their understanding of infanticide because they don't have a handle on human dignity and why we all have equal worth. Inherent equal worth.
That's the fundamental difference.
Yeah.
Right, what you said. All right, Ryan. So for our last segment, I have some audience questions for you.
Oh, great. Okay.
So the first one is from Dr. J on Twitter, or X, Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, X now. I don't know how to say it. That's what's so confusing.
It shouldn't be formally because it's still pretty much the same regime of censorship and suppression. But anyway.
Yeah, okay. Okay, anyway, so this is the question for Dr. J. How do we get more churches involved in the pro-life movement?
We need more pastors with a spine. There are great resources, like CareNet has a great resource, Making Life Disciples, for instance, which is a curriculum for churches. Okay. And it's a great way when churches feel like, well, how do we can't design something on our own. We can't create something on our own. Well, there's something that exists to help educate and inform on these things. There are a number of pro-life organizations, obviously, present company included, that have great resources to actually educate.
So Radiance Foundation?
Radiance Foundation, yes.
Abortion-free cities.
I mean, there is great content out there to educate, and churches are often pulling in other speakers.
That's right.
Bring in pro-life speakers. And if your pastor hasn't, ask them nicely, take them out to lunch. People love food. I mean, and pastor's wife, and maybe sometimes the wife is the pastor, but the pastor's wife, a friend of mine holds teas with, like a lunchtime tea with pastors' wives, and they talk about these issues. We cannot be afraid to approach our pastors. We cannot be afraid to approach leadership. But if churches do not engage, we will have Ohio over and over again, Michigan over and over again. And it's because of the apathy of churches that we are in the place where we are at.
Yeah,
so we desperately need them.
I think it's a CareNet site years ago that was showing that majority of women who have abortions said they've gone to church at least one time in the last month.
Right.
So, yeah, no, our Abortion-Free Cities campaign, we have this church partnership kit, and you can download it. It's free. But it has, like, sample sermons and flyers, because one thing that we've found is knocking on doors in communities surrounding abortion facilities in the past 2 years, 75% of the people we talk to who live in a walkable area to an abortion facility have never heard of a pregnancy center.
Right.
They don't know any of the resources. But if the church would consider themselves to be, the mouthpiece for Christ's hands and feet, right? We always talk about being the hands and feet of Christ. We also need to consider ourselves being the mouthpiece.
Yeah.
And being out there and be going, hey, community, there is hope and love and healing down the street at this free pregnancy center, a free women's health center, or a free maternity home. We've got to get that word out, and churches have such a crucial role.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, after the Dobbs decision, we've definitely seen some not great trends when it comes to Christian campuses in abortion. We saw about 15 more Christian campuses start promoting Planned Parenthood.
And part of that is because their ignorance as to who and what Planned Parenthood is. Now, there are those who do know, but there are too many Christians, whether they're college campuses or churches, that have no idea. In fact, for a while, my wife and I went to a church where the youth pastor's wife, after we had spoken on stage that morning, she said, I didn't even know what Planned Parenthood was. And I'm thinking, you're a youth pastor's wife. How do you not know who and what Planned Parenthood is? So a lot of it is just this desperate need for education in these churches. And you mentioned the pregnancy centers. I mean, we've worked with a number of churches that actually have launched pregnancy centers, but in large part, pregnancy centers across the United States, nearly 3,000, they're looking for these partnerships with churches.
They are.
And how many people don't know? I can't tell you. I went to a mega church for a long time, and a young woman came up to me and she said, I wish I had known, because we had just done a weekend conference on all these issues. She said, I wish I would have known. I went to a church, there are thousands of people at this church. I never once heard the words pregnancy center. I didn't even know what that was. How is that possible? We've got this phenomenal resource of love and compassion.
Yeah.
And so many churches are either too embarrassed or too unaware to talk about it. They should be partnering with these pregnancy centers and maternity homes.
It's tragic.
It would shift culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that.
If the church wouldn't tolerate abortion, I'm convinced we wouldn't have an abortion culture in this country.
Exactly.
All right, one more question from Paul on Instagram. What is the craziest thing that anyone has ever said to you?
Oh, gosh.
And in the pro-life movement, we get some
crazies.
crazy things said to us.
I don't know. I have to go back to when we began the Radiance Foundation, and one of the first campaigns we launched was called TooManyAborted.com, which dealt with abortion's hugely disproportionate impact in the Black community. And I remember being called a white racist Southern bigot. And I just found that funny. First of all, if you're Southern, does not mean that you're racist or a bigot. If you're white, doesn't mean that you're racist. But that's what they call me. Like, I guess they don't know anything about me, but they were so radically pro-abortion, and they couldn't understand why this guy who happened to be living in Atlanta at the time. First of all, I'm from Pennsylvania, so I'm not even a Southerner. Although I will say I've lived in Virginia more than in Pennsylvania. But that just blew me away. And I thought when we first started Radiance Foundation, people are gonna love me. They're gonna love my story. It's so like beautiful and just emotional. I didn't realize that people will hate the mess out of you, not because of who you are, but because of what you believe. And so I remember seeing that in this blog article, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. So that to me was one of the most, there are a lot of things said. I've been told different ways that I could die, which was great. There was a time that our family actually had to literally move because of death threats. So yeah, I've heard a lot of things. I've been called Uncle Clarence. I've been called Uncle Tom. And that's for ignorant folks who obviously have never read Uncle Tom's Cabin, because if you're going to call me the guy who actually risked his life so that other people would be set free, call me an Uncle Tom all day long. By the way, I love Clarence Thomas. Thank you, Justice Clarence Thomas. You bring clarity to that court every day. So thank you.
He does. Well, that's all we have time for today. We could have talked forever, especially since you and I haven't seen each other. But before I wrap up, do you want to share where everyone can find out more about Radiance and what you're all doing?
Sure. The easiest way to get to us is Radiance.Life. You can see all the videos, graphics, fact sheets, op-eds that we write, all the research that we do. I also want to encourage people to go to adoptedandloved.com. That's our initiative where we celebrate the beauty of adoption.
That's awesome. Thank you all for watching. Please make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. All links to this episode will be in the show notes below. Thank you.